6 years before 9/11, Oklahoma, Timothy McVeigh. Unless the laws of physics were suspended that morning, there's no way that Ryder truck fuel fertilizer device could have brought that building down in that way. Not me. This is people like Brigadier General Ben Partin, who spent a lifetime in explosives and weapons development with the US military, who wrote to 500 people, politicians, media people, a long list of reasons why this was impossible and why the explosives had to be inside the building on some of the pillars. He was ignored. They said that McVeigh had gone there and found out all about it and sussed it out, as we would say. Well, why that morning did he come into a gas station in the Ryder truck and ask the way to the Murrah building? I mean, you know, so connecting him and the Ryder truck to the Murrah building when he's about to blow it up. Why that morning was the bomb squad in full reaction gear in the hour and a half before the bomb went off? They denied it, but they had to admit it later through the wealth of witnesses who saw him. Why did McVeigh, when he was supposed to be trying to get the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms, which had an office there because of their involvement in Waco 2 years earlier, why, when he could have parked the vehicle right next to their office, did he park it just about as far away as it was possible to do with the Murrah building? Why were all the surveillance cameras around this building confiscated by the FBI that morning, which, according to local television stations who interviewed people, said that it showed someone looking like McVeigh leave the Ryder truck, but there was another guy with him, this so-called John Doe 2, who suddenly disappeared from the story. The questions and the anomalies about what happened to the Murrah building are endless, because it was another inside job. Within 24 hours, Clinton was calling for an easing of restrictions on the American military's involvement in domestic law enforcement. And all that has been added to since 9/11. It's a process of breaking down resistance to the Orwellian state to protect us from the terrorists, who are the same people who want to introduce the Orwellian state. Now, the Murrah building questions could have been answered very easily. You get experts to go in among the rubble and they'll tell you basically where the bombs went off, what the bombs were, and the whole shebang. What the government did is employ this company, Controlled Demolition Group, to go in, pull the building down before it had been analysed by independent experts, and it was taken and kept in a desert under armed guard by a company called Wackenhut. And Wackenhut is was created and has been peopled ever since by CIA, FBI type people. And the guy who runs it is a very close associate of the Bush family, indeed has funded their political campaigns. Now, what a coincidence that when the Twin Towers fell, and people were saying, hey, that did not look like a controlled demolition to me, that the rubble was taken away, indeed sold on Rudolph Giuliani's say-so and others, without being properly analysed. The company they employed to do that was called Controlled Demolition, and independent experts were never allowed to investigate the reason that the towers came down. Why? Because it would blown the whole scam. This guy, Father George Bush, as presidents go, is as high up the Illuminati ladder that I've come across. Nowhere near the top, but higher from a president's point of view. And this whole Bush family and around him is weaved a extraordinarily effective web of deception. The guy in the middle there, in the chair in the corner, is Prescott Bush, the father of Father George, grandfather of Boy George. And Prescott Bush was involved with the Harriman Empire, Illuminati Empire in America, and he was involved at a very, almost controlling level of a company called the Union Banking Corporation, the UBC. And as has been exposed, not just by people like me, but by people like John Loftus, the president of the Holocaust Museum down in Florida, the Nazis were funded to a large extent out of America by these very people. The Union Banking Corporation connected into the banking and steel empire in Europe of a man called Fritz Thyssen, who was an acknowledged funder of Hitler. and the money came out of America through to Tyson and through to Hitler. That's how they turned the Weimar Republic, which was just an economic disaster zone, into a military force that could take on Europe. And he was involved in a number of companies that were actually closed down under the Trading with the Enemies Act during the Second World War, because they were Nazi companies. Prescott Bush, Skull and Bones. Well, he spawned the two guys who went on to become President of the United States and continue with his Nazi philosophy, clearly. The Carlyle Group is an organization that operates a lot of fundamental influence on the American government currently, and very much involving the situation around 9/11. And the Carlyle Group has a wonderful thing, a wonderful kind of way of doing things. It buys up companies that are struggling, who depend on government contracts for their profitability. They ain't getting government contracts, so they're bought up quite cheaply, and then, because of these guys, they start getting government contracts and become very, very wealthy and profitable organizations. So it's nice work if you can get it. One of the major players in the Carlyle Group has been Father George Bush. Its chairman at the time of 9/11 was Frank Carlucci, the neocon who has this problem with leaders of African countries. And another major player in the Carlyle Group, James Baker, who was Secretary of State to Bush when he was president. And they connect into all these other people that have been behind the Bush administration. Colin Powell, they call him Colin because he's full of shit apparently. Colin Powell described Carlucci as my mentor. Do you think Carlucci and the Carlyle Group might have had just a bit of influence at the State Department when Powell was head at the time of 9/11? I think they might. And of course, one of the other things about the Carlyle Group is their major game is weapons sales. When you have a war, that's real good for business. Best of pals, the Secretary of Defense and aspartame man Donald Rumsfeld was a roommate of Carlucci at Yale University, home of the Skull and Bones, and he was a classmate of Baker at Yale. Again, all these people connect and behind the scenes operate the same agenda. Carlyle Group and Father George Bush had a very famous family who were their clients, the Bin Laden family. You may have heard of them. And did a lot of business with them. When Boy George started his first energy company, appropriately called Abusto Energy, because every energy company he was involved in went abusto. It really did. One of the investors in Abusto Energy was a guy called Salem bin Laden, who was the head of the bin Laden construction empire at the time. And then he died in a plane crash in Texas, which is kind of funny. If you get close to the Bush family, I wouldn't travel by air from what I've been seeing over the years. And the Carlyle Group connected into the bin Laden family. This was a lovely one. You remember the Khobar Towers? It was in Saudi Arabia as part of the American base, and it was blown up, and it was blamed on Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. And then the Americans employed a company to rebuild it, Bin Laden Construction.